All right, so this was on some handout from earlier on where I just reminded you what an acute angle, a right angle, an obtuse angle, and a straight angle are. So an acute angle is just anything smaller with a measure that's less than 90 degrees. So that would be an acute angle. Okay. A right, here I'll do it up here. And you have a handout like this. A right angle is like this, but as Chase pointed out, you can't assume it's a right angle, a 90-degree angle, unless it has that little box. Because some of the ones on the test and on your worksheet will look like right angles. Don't assume. Unless it has a box, we don't know. It could be 91 degrees. It could be 89.5 degrees. Okay. Between 90 and 180 is like this, and we call that obtuse. And 180 degrees is just a straight line. All right, now, pairs of angles. Pairs of angles are complementary if their measures add up to 90 degrees. So if I have a right angle, and I have two adjacent angles, and if this is a right angle, these add up to 90, these are complementary. Okay, supplementary angles add to 180. So if you have a straight line, this angle plus this angle, the measures add to 180. Okay, vertical angles. Vertical angles, if you have two straight lines that intersect, the angles that are on opposite sides of the intersection are called vertical angles. So 1 and 2 are vertical angles, 3 and 4 are vertical angles. They're congruent, which means they have the same measure. Okay. Okay, so we're going to find the values of the variables. So what do we know? What do we know? So that we're given this information, but how can we use it given the definitions we just learned?
We're finding x.
We're finding x.
Since we know they're vertical.
These are vertical angles, so these have to have the
Yeah.
same measure. I can use my little tick marks. Okay, so then we know this equals that.
Yeah.
And there's my equation. So 2x minus 11 equals 105. And then we can just use our algebra. We add 11 to both sides. And then we have to get just one x, so we have x equals 58. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of what's on the test will be this sort of thing. Figuring out, what do I know? And they're like little puzzles. You've got to look at them and figure out, what do I know about these figures, okay, already without being told. Now, if you look at this one, yeah, I know vertical angles are congruent, but that doesn't really help me because I have an x expression and a y expression. I'd have to make a system of equations here, and I don't want to do that. I want to keep it simple. But this is a straight line. So this angle plus this angle have to add up to 180. So this plus this have to be 180. So y minus 12 plus 3y minus 8 must equal 180. So I can combine like terms. That gives me 4y minus, I've got negative 12 and negative 8, so minus 20 equals 180. If I add 20 to both sides, I get 4y equals 200. And if I divide by 4, I get y equals 50. So, we're finding the value of the variable. So we need to find x too. Now I don't have to go through this whole process with my x's, and because we know these add up to 180. But we also know that this, since y is 50, This measure is 50 minus 12, so that makes it 38. So we know this measure has to be 38 because these are vertical angles. So you could use either approach. You could say this plus this have to equal 180. Or you could say, ooh, I know this is 38, so I know this is 38. And that's a little easier to solve. So this is 2x minus 20 equals 38. I'll add 20 to both sides. 2x equals 58. And then x equals 29. Okay. You could put degrees on there. It's not absolutely necessary because the degrees were already on here. But you could. Okay, so did you set these equal to each other? Don't forget to sign in. So these are vertical angles. So we're going to set them equal. So then we have 5x minus 50 equals 3x plus 20. All right, so then we can subtract 3x from both sides and get 2x minus 50 equals 20. We can add 50 to both sides and get 2x equals 70. So then x equals 35. And you can always plug your 35 back in, you know, like we like to do in algebra and check your answer. If angle A and angle B are complementary, we know that means that the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B equals what? They're complementary.
90.
90. Good. Okay? And we also know, because they tell us, that the measure of angle B is 3 times the measure of angle A. So measure of angle B equals 3 measure of angle A. So I can use substitution. I can put this where measure of angle B is, using substitution. So then measure of angle A plus 3 measure of angle A equals 90. So that means 4 times the measure of angle A equals 90. So measure of angle A equals, it's 22.5, right? I think that's right. 88, yep, 22.5. So then you have to find the measure of angle B too. So you can subtract this from 90 and it would give you 67.5. Yep, that's right. What'd you get?
The measure is C equals 20.
That's what I got. Is that what you got?
I'm so,
You were still working? Okay.
that was what I got.
That was what you got? So we know the measure of angle C plus the measure of angle D, they add up to 180 because that's what supplementary means. And then we know that this measure of angle D is 8 times the measure of angle C. So if we substitute, then I'm not going to write out that line. We have 8, this will be 8 plus 1. You get 9 measure of angle C equals 180. So then the measure of angle C equals 20. And since they add up to 180, you know that the measure of angle D equals 160. All right. Any questions? Make sense? Okay, now we get to the fun stuff. Finally. It's fun, but it's kind of tedious, so you have to really pay attention. All right, so it's on the back, and it's that big chart. Okay, so first, for perpendicular lines, so they intersect to form a right angle. So perpendicular lines form congruent adjacent angles. Okay, so if they're perpendicular, then the adjacent angles are this and this. All right? This is actually a line. So this angle and this angle are adjacent. They have to be congruent because they're both 90 degrees. So that's all that's saying. 2 lines that form congruent adjacent angles are perpendicular. So if you have 2 lines that intersect, and this angle have the same measure, this has got to be vertical. The only way for that to happen is if they're both 90 degrees. That's what that's saying. And then this one says, if the exterior sides of two acute adjacent angles, so you've got an adjacent acute angle here, or an acute angle here and an adjacent one here. If the exterior sides of the two angles are perpendicular, then the angles are complementary, which means they add up to 90 degrees. Okay, so again, these things kind of make sense. So we're going to use these and the other stuff that we learned on the front.